Hey, folks.
Okay. Okie dokie. All right, let's call the meeting to order if everybody's ready.
All right.
Okay, good. So this is the Watershed Committee Board of Directors meeting for March 17th, 2022. And the first item would be to do a roll call of board members.
Sure. Director Gibson,
Here.
Vice Chair Schmidt,
Here.
and Chair Bragman.
I'm here too. The next item is to adopt the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
Move approval.
Second.
Roll, please.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Schmidt,
Aye.
and Chair Bragman.
Aye. So the next thing is to hear public comment, and this is for comments by attendees that are not related to items that are on the agenda. So these are non-agenda related items. So do we have any public comment?
Yes, Renee Voss, please. Go ahead, Renee.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
I wanted to thank Director Bragman for coming out to look at the Happersburger and Y2K trails a couple of weeks ago, and to understand some of the issues. And also wanted to thank the Marin Water staff for putting a sign up at the top near Pine Mountain Road. I think that'll help, but as Director Bragman can attest, there was a bike that came down right when we were walking near the top of the trail, or near Pine Mountain Road. So there's still a lot to do there, but it seems like progress. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. And I owe you an email. I read your article in the IJ, so I want to talk to you about that.
Okay.
Any other public comment? I'm sorry.
There are none.
Okay, then let's move on to our first actual agenda item, which is to consider approval of the minutes of the last Watershed meeting from December 16th, 2021. Are there any changes or comments about the agenda minutes? Is there a motion out there?
I'll move approval of the minutes for December 16th.
I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second. Can we get a roll call, please?
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Vice Chair Schmidt,
Aye.
and Chair Bragman.
Aye. Moving on to our next item. This is from Carl Sanders. This is in regard to an update on the Azalea Hill project. Carl?
Good afternoon. Let me share my screen. Before I share my screen, I'll just give everyone a brief update. This is an annual update on our Azalea Hill project. The MSD-IS was adopted in 2019, and this is an annual report that provides background on what we have done and the mitigation measures that we have taken. And we have a PowerPoint to share with you. Okay. Okay, can everyone see my screen and hear me fine? Very good.
Yes.
Okay. This is again an annual.
Carl, do you want to switch your view and make it the larger view? So display settings at the top and switch it to the second screen.
Swap.
Do the swap one.
How's that? How's that?
Yes.
Okay. I got two screens, new technology.
Mhm.
Here we go. This is again an annual report on the progress that we've made over the last calendar year on mostly phase 2 work within the Azalea Hill Trail Restoration Project. Outline of what we'll cover today. The project as it stands, our existing and ongoing compliance work, the 3 bridges that we got built this last year, updates on our current grants and those pending, as well as looking ahead at phase 3 planning efforts, and new for this year, our rare plant mitigation and monitoring plan.
Wow.
Just an overview of the project area again in general, just looking at phase 1 in green and phase 2 and sort of a pumpkin orange. That's what we've been working on. And then phase 3, where we're still in planning phases. As part of our mitigation and monitoring plan, we have to record what we have conducted each year in terms of mitigation and monitoring. This year, it included Western pond turtle surveys, red leg and foothill yellow-legged frog surveys, as well as contractor pre-construction training on avoidance measures for those species. Red leg and yellow leg frogs were not found on the job site, but we do have Western pond turtles that are in the area, and we installed appropriate avoidance fencing and gave training to staff and contractors conducting the work. We continue with our tree replacement mitigation, which is a 3-to-1 ratio. We didn't remove that many trees out there, so in order to construct the trail as we've gone so far, and so I think we have 30+ trees that we've replaced, all native trees that are in the area. New this year, we have a rare plant mitigation monitoring plan that we put together. Kleinfelder's helping us with that, and then we're going to be it'll be used to help us mitigate and monitor impacts to 17 special plants listed in the ISMND. Phase 2, we continue the construction. Last year, we constructed the major bridge across Bullfrog Creek. That's bridge number 1 as it's listed here. And this year we had 3 more bridges installed at sites 2, 3, and 4. We'll be continuing work as we look ahead on phase 2 bridges in this up and coming calendar year. A view of bridges in bridge 2, 3, and 4. Good view of 3 here in terms of the effort it takes to both form and pour and install these types of structures in a very remote location. A lot of this is done with handwork and small mini excavators. We had MCBC, Marin County Bicycle Coalition, come out on 2 separate occasions to help us finish the installation on bridges. And you can see their labor here involved in setting the posts and railing and decking for 2 of the bridges.
If I can stop just for a minute here, Carl, and
Sure.
add something. I think that these 2 graphics you have right here,
Yes.
and the fact that it's a partnership with the Bicycle Coalition, I'm suggesting that our communications people should highlight that this is well worth advertising to the public. I think public should know this.
I would wholeheartedly agree, and it's good for an advocacy group such as the MCBC to be involved in something that we're going to ask their participation on monitoring use as well. So
Yeah, thank you.
you bet. Rare plant mitigation monitoring plan, again, new for this year. It was approved by CDFW in February. And as it says here, supports future phases of work and provides methods for mitigating and monitoring potential impacts to those 17 rare plants covered in our ISMND. And we plan to reach out to local stakeholders such as CNPS to coordinate field site visits and discuss this mitigation plan with them. A brief background here on the status of current grants associated with this project. We had secured and now have spent out Prop 68 money through that came through CCNB for phase 2 work. That was $225,000. We secured a RTP, state RTP phase grant for $850,000 to be used on phase 3 work. That'll a good portion of that will go toward the geotechnical reports needed for the bridges and for designing the retaining wall up near the intersection with Bolinas Fairfax Road. We've also submitted a Land, Water, and Conservation Fund grant for $667,000. The status of that is pending. And of note, we secured a donation from MCBC in the amount of $18,000 that will eventually be used on phase 2 bridge materials. And I should note that work to secure that money was done in part by 2 of our AmeriCorps staff that part of their role within the AmeriCorps, they need to help generate funds as part of their AmeriCorps obligations.
Mhm.
Looking ahead, we have additional bridges, 3 more bridges to complete in phase 2. As I mentioned earlier, we have a retaining wall to design and build where phase 3 connects with Bolinas Fairfax Road. And we need to complete rare plant surveys through phase 3, which probably has a significant majority of the rare plants that we're concerned about. And we're also hoping to begin the trail brushing within phase 3, which is the first portion of completing the trail work in that area. You'll notice on the photo here, but I'll just call this one out. This is a state CCC crew helping us with a very labor-intensive portion of hand mixing and hand pouring the volumes of concrete that it takes to to create the footings that the bridges are set on within each of the phase 2 sites, creek crossings. And with that, I'll stop sharing and see if anyone has any questions.
Just one point, question, actually, I guess. Could you give a little more detail on the 3-to-1 tree replacement ratio? I'm not quite sure what that really means.
Sure. For each tree removed during the course of the project, in this case, it was a phase 2 tread alignment. There was approximately, I think 10 to 12, I think it was 12 trees that were removed, each of which were not very significant in size, but they were I think under 12 inches. We are to replace them with new trees at a ratio of 3-to-1, and then monitor those replacements for up to 5 years to make sure that we have had success with that replacement ratio.
And the removal was simply because the tree was in the way of the construction going forward. Is that?
Yeah, we took every effort to minimize removals.
Yeah.
Yeah, but on certain occasions we had to remove either to accommodate the alignment. Yes.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. That's great.
I have a quick question, Kurt. Where did you get the water for the concrete? Were you able to take it out of the creek or whatever you were crossing?
I know where they got it.
We had an ample supply nearby. It was Lake Alpine Lake.
But you still had to haul it though from there to.
No, we
site.
we ran pumps. We ran fire pumps from
Oh,
Alpine
good.
Lake through fire hoses to the hand mixers. Most of that concrete still had to be hand delivered with the state CC crew or the local CCNB crew.
Cool, thanks.
So I was at that, the final phase, I think, of that 3rd bridge. And you actually caught me in one of those photos, which means it should not be used for publication.
Okay.
Seriously, it shouldn't.
Okay.
But anyway, I think this is a really legacy project. A lot of the MCBC participants were young people, youth, and it's, that bridge is going to be there until they're adults. I mean, it's really a massive beams, 6-inch spikes to attach the decking to the cross members. It's really an impressive piece of work that you guys have done, especially considering how remote it is. So carry on, and thank you. The one other thing I wanted to ask about was on the mitigation for the giant salamanders. And I've seen those out there. They are also very impressive critters. Whether there's any consideration of putting like tubes underneath the trail so they don't get squashed.
Well, the Pacific giant salamander of concern there occurs generally in wet and riparian areas. And we laid out all our work to avoid impacts. We weren't actually in the creeks, even on the bridge that you were working on. We tried to stay out of the creeks, and we actually put in temporary bridge structures to allow the hand crews to get back and forth before the stringers were set. So that was our mitigation for salamanders. Also, those sites, at least out in the meadow areas that you might have seen, are also much drier, and we did not encounter Pacific giant salamanders.
Yeah. Okay. So you've also kind of relocated that trail a little bit, because I've seen them I saw them on the old trail. So that was prior to the project. So anyway,
Yeah,
go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, yes, you nailed it. We a part of our trail design was to limit or minimize impacts to wetland and riparian areas, and part of our permitting required that we stay out of stream crossings during the installation of those bridges. So
Good. Okay. Any other questions from the board?
A quick one. It's probably going to last until their great grandchildren are adults, Larry.
I hope so.
I mean,
I
think
hope
that's
so as well.
I think it's a 100-year structure,
Yeah,
or something like that.
I would wholeheartedly agree. That's concrete, and those are cedar laminated beams, and that's redwood decking and railings. Really, they're going to outlast all of us. Our kids will go check them out and still use them.
Yeah, it's very, very impressive construction. Okay, so let's hear any public comment.
Yes, we have several. Nona Dennis, then Roger Roberts. Go ahead, Miss Dennis.
Okay, unmute. Okay, this is very, we've been waiting a long time for an update on Azalea Hill. I do want to remind you that both the Native Plant Society and Marine Conservation League had some reservations about the trail, because it is phase 2, I think it is, goes through a native grassland, and phase 3 really goes through serpentine species. And so one of the reasons that we really approved it was that it involved 4 miles, decommissioning 4 miles of kind of spaghetti trails, social trails across Azalea Hill. Where and when, where is that work going on? When is that work going on to do the decommissioning of 4 miles of social trails?
I can take that, or at least start it. Hi, Nona.
Hi, Carl.
Good afternoon. Our plan right now is we have signed all of the entry points for many of those social trails that spaghetti their way through the interior of Azalea Hill. But the intent is not to decommission or to restore those until we've got our existing trail alignment in place, so that we have a preferable trail alignment that's also open to the public. You know, during construction, we've closed the trail alignment to the public because we're working, and so people are probably still using many of those non-system trails. But our intent is that that's going to be toward the end of the project before we can put that. I think there's over 4 miles of non-system trails through serpentine habitat.
Right. Okay. Well, that's your strategy. That sounds good.
Yeah.
And phase 1 was the improvement to the the equestrian and hiker trail that comes more or less straight down the hill. Is that correct? So that's been completed, has it?
That is phase 1, and it is not complete. We're kind of skipping around here a little bit. We did some work on phase 1, but we have to come back to it. And that's our existing route, our existing system trail, and we're going to be making improvements to the tread and to the alignment so that it can safely accommodate both horses and hikers.
Right. Okay. So I didn't understand that phase 1 isn't necessarily completed. Yeah. Okay. So you've cleared it up.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Dennis.
Thank you.
Mr. Roberts, please.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
My question or concern, which is really jumping off from Nona's comments, on the backside of Azalea Hill, there's a social trail that goes very close to what must be the largest buckeye tree in all of Marin. And the trail goes right by that tree, and people can't resist letting their children climb it. And is there going to be a realignment to avoid that tree, or is there going to be some kind of fencing off of the tree so that we protect its root structure and discourage people to climb that tree? Do you know the tree I'm talking about? It is enormous. There's no tree that I've seen anywhere that is a buckeye that's as big as that tree. It must be 150 years old.
Roger, I'll confess, I'm not entirely sure I know which buckeye you're referring to. Maybe we can talk offline at some point. You could show it to me.
Yeah, well, I'd be happy to go out there and walk back. It's been a number of years since I've been out there in that area, but I think I can help you find it.
Sure. And generally, we don't fence off individual heritage trees. And if there is a social trail, that is impacting it, maybe, we're going to try to decommission or put to bed all of the social trails within the interior, but maybe we could take some additional effort on that particular tree for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next two, Tom Boss and Larry Minikes. Mr. Boss, please.
Good afternoon, directors. Tom Boss, Marin County Bicycle Coalition. Just a few things I wanted to share. One, I just wanted to call out that this project kind of got underway with a meeting or a walk of the current alignment with Nona and Roger Roberts, and I think I recall the tree he's talking about. So while we don't always see eye to eye, I'm glad that we've been able to mostly build consensus around the multiple benefits of this project. I did want to clarify the gift that came from MCBC for bridge materials is actually made possible by a donation from one of our members, Greg Kidd, an avid mountain biker, and he told us recently he's looking for ways to give back however he can, because he just loves riding and hiking in Marin. So he was able to provide those funds to to get the bridge supply. So, and also I encourage other stakeholders. We've known since the start that this is a project that has many components and is costly, and that there would likely be opportunities to do fundraising around building a bridge or doing interpretive signage, that kind of thing. So I encourage other stakeholders to step up if there's an interest in supporting this trail and find a way to contribute. And then I also just wanted to call out that our volunteers are working on the trail itself, but we're also dedicated to working on the restoration work and the decommissions as soon as that work is on the schedule. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom.
Good, Mr. Minikes.
I know exactly the tree Roger is talking about. It's a beautiful tree, and people have also carved into it, which is the other problem.
I think I know too, but I just want to confirm. So.
Right. And we did discuss it. I was on the walk. We did discuss it. As you know, the Marin Conservation League has supported this project. When we walked it, we had members of the California Native Plant Society there. And Eva Buxton, I was walking with her, and she pointed out numerous rare and endangered little tiny plants that I would have never paid attention to. And she'd explain what this was, and they're all along that alignment. And the major concern when this project was started was that those are protected and that people don't go off the trail. And that, I think, is really important, along with monitoring invasives, the entry of invasives to that trail. And I just want to mention that because I don't think anyone here is from CNPS, but speaking for them in this case, for the rare and endangered little things out there. And good project. I'm glad to see it's moving along. Appreciate all the work MCBC is putting in on the bridge. It saves a lot of money and gets things done, and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board or from staff? Okay, so thanks a lot, Carl. That was
Yeah,
real,
thank you.
real positive presentation. So we'll see you hopefully before next year again with a progress report. Thanks again. Okay, next item is item 3, which is a letter in support of Beaver reintroduction. And is this Sean's item?
Good afternoon, Director Sean Horn, Watershed Resource Manager. We're going to invite Eric Etlinger, our aquatic ecologist, in to give a presentation on the Beaver reintroduction item.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Eric Etlinger, aquatic ecologist with the Fisheries Department. I'm gonna share my screen. So for a number of years, a group of conservationists and resource agency personnel, including myself, have been assessing the feasibility of reintroducing beavers to Lagunitas Creek or to Marin County more widely, primarily to improve salmon habitat. And throughout a lot of the Western United States, beaver reintroduction has been successfully implemented to improve fish and wildlife habitat and to retain water in arid landscapes. So as an overview, I will describe Marin Water's history of adding wood to Lagunitas Creek for salmon habitat and how some of that work can be done by beavers. I will also summarize what was learned from the feasibility assessment and what role Marin Water can play in this project. So our fisheries department has spent millions of dollars enhancing salmon habitat, largely by building large wood structures in Lagunitas Creek. Now, the goals of these structures include creating deep pools, providing fish with refuge from high stream flows, and collecting small woody debris that provides fish with shelter from predators and insects. And our monitoring has shown that this work has successfully increased the survival rates of juvenile coho salmon. Much of the fish habitat we're creating are what beavers create 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, I don't want you to come away from this presentation thinking that Marin Water's Fisheries Department could be replaced by a bunch of aquatic rodents. So let me be clear.
That was my first thought.
Yeah.
Let's not think about that too deeply. I want to be clear that beavers are amazing animals and they could be one of the tools we can use to improve salmon habitat. So the recent feasibility assessment found abundant habitat for beavers in lower Lagunitas Creek. Beaver reintroduction is supported by the owners of the 2 largest ranches in the area. And in fact, beavers would likely be relocated to one of these ranches. The National Park Service, which owns most of lower Lagunitas Creek, has communicated that they simply don't have the bandwidth to participate in the reintroduction effort, but would welcome beavers on their land. Moving forward, we would ask CDFW to evaluate any potential drinking water issues, which actually brings us to the next steps. Right now, we're collecting letters of support for beaver reintroduction to be submitted to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Staff is recommending that the board direct the general manager to sign a letter of support. And after that, there's still a lot of work that needs to happen, including identifying agency and partner roles and developing a reintroduction timeline. Now, Marin Water's role in this project would include participating in stakeholder meetings, providing technical expertise, and assisting in monitoring beavers following the reintroduction. So I will stop sharing and take any questions you may have.
Are there, you mentioned the quality of the water. Is that a negative or just a concern about unintended consequences, something like that?
Yeah, let me, all right, there we go. So beavers are known to carry Giardia, which is an intestinal parasite, and other aquatic mammals do as well. In fact, muskrats are known to carry higher loads of Giardia, and they're already in our reservoirs. But this is something
but Eric, nobody calls it muskrat fever, beaver fever. Everybody's heard of beaver fever, right?
It's true. I don't know if the younger generation has heard of beaver fever, but
if they've been to Vail, Colorado, they have.
It is true. Unfortunately, Giardia became known as beaver fever, and so it's something that the public may be aware of, and we would want to have CDFW investigate and assess that, just to to allay any concerns.
Do you have any idea where they get it? Do they get it from another mammal, or they get it from wastewater?
I don't know specifically. Any beavers that would be reintroduced to Lagunitas Creek would be relocated from elsewhere, and likely those beavers would, if the source population had Giardia, they would come with it. So, but that would be another point when CDFW would kind of assess the health of the beavers that are coming in.
Yeah, because if it's water draining, if it's from the reservoirs, I don't see a problem. But if it's to the reservoirs, and I understand the beavers may not understand our global plans, it would raise my concerns. I like the idea, of having the beavers around, but Giardia is a pretty serious thing, and not the easiest thing in the world to remove.
Yeah, I would say that as part of any assessment, one of the things I would do is I would look at our muskrats that we have in all of our reservoirs and assess, to what extent Giardia is already endemic. But that's absolutely, it's something we've identified that will need to be assessed before this can go forward.
Do you think it's possible to get Giardia-free beavers?
That is,
like, treat them?
That is quite a ways down the road, but it's absolutely something that we're going to investigate.
But if muskrats are in the watershed and already have Giardia, they would just, it's here, and we're already having to treat our water, and we already do treat our water with that as a factor in mind. So I think understanding better whether it makes a substantial increase that we should be aware of or concerned about is prudent, but I would imagine that the muskrat population is going to be vastly larger than the beaver population, or something commensurate. I don't want suddenly the beavers to this to be an issue a lot, that is unnecessarily driven by that. But I just want to say I really support us moving forward with a letter of support on this. As beavers were such a fundamental component of our riverine ecosystems historically, and so much of the work that we're doing here in our watershed and in watersheds up and down the coast are about trying to restore our natural processes, of which the letter of support, I think, captures a number of them. I think there's actually even more, which is, beavers, I would say, are a climate adaptation strategy, because when we restore large wood habitat to our streams, we're restoring the health of our streams, and so that when we do face extreme dry years like the year we're in and have been in, our streams provide ecosystem support and benefits under greater duress. And that, I think, is a really important factor. If we are going to deal with extreme dry years of a greater frequency and intensity going forward, that restoring the health of our streams is a smart strategy, not only for fish and wildlife, but also for, I think, honestly, for our water and as a water supply issue. So I would maybe put that to you, Eric, to consider whether to modify some of the letter to express some of those points, if you agree. But I think this is a great idea, and it's something that we ought to support.
Are there any other negative consequences, the potential negative consequences?
So I've spent a lot of time thinking about worst case scenarios, and one concern I have is if members of the public see our support for beaver reintroduction as taking responsibility for everything beavers would do in the watershed. And I think that's a communication issue. And I think would be easy to demonstrate that our support is for a process that is being taken on by a number of different organizations and individuals, and we are supportive and helping in that. But ultimately, we are not going to be responsible for everything the beavers do. Right. And as far as a worst case scenario, I think that's not it shouldn't be terribly worrisome.
Yeah. Okay. It seems to me, obviously we're concerned about the potential negatives here, but it seems to me a very positive idea. One, excuse me, one concern I have, separating the Giardia problem from the attitude of the public about our water supply. They're two different issues. We could be totally satisfied we're good with the science on that, but we have to prepare ourselves to deal with just the general public impression, because the last thing we need is for the public to have concerns about the quality of our water. I mean, we're in the stratosphere of avoiding that just historically, because we always say, well, we provide you water from our watershed, couldn't be better. We don't want to lose that. Yeah, no. And but again, that's a communication problem, and a preparation for the communication problem needs to be thought out.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add, I really appreciate Monty's comments. That this project is well below Kent Lake. So I just don't think, it's going to infect or affect our water supply. And my understanding is Giardia is already in the watershed, within our watershed from deer. I know somebody that got Giardia from Fairfax Creek. Whether it was a muskrat or deer, I really don't know. I'm not sure if they inoculated our dogs or not against Giardia, but no, I support the project. I'm very confident as far as its safety, because it's so far below Peters Dam. I just don't see it actually affecting water quality. The other thing I thought of, and it's kind of just related to what Monty said about restoring the creek and climate change. If we slow that flow of water, if the beavers do, it may add to creek depth and provide, more moisture in the watershed upstream. So I really like the project. I know they reintroduced a little colony of them in Martinez, of all places, in California. And it seems to have worked out for them. So I think we should do it. Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to highlight that, that also that, when we look at the benefits of beavers on stream channels, by creating more wood structures and deeper pools, we're improving temperature in the stream as well. These are things that we have requirements around, with regard to our water supply operations. So if we do things like this, we're actually, again, benefiting, I think, also our water supply, which I know is a central tenet to our purpose as a district. So I think they are well aligned, and for that reason, again, I think it's really worth supporting.
Okay, so
Are
Eric,
you sure about that, Monty? Are you sure that it decreases temperatures? It seems to me that if you held the water up, it would be more likely to warm above the water temperatures in the reservoirs.
Deeper pools in the ambient air temperature is going to will set whatever the flow is, whatever the temperature of the water is. And Eric could speak to this more eloquently than me, but having deeper pools provides cold water refugia for rearing juvenile steelhead and coho, and that's the part of the health of the habitat and the water quality related to temperature that's important for fish. But maybe Eric, there's more you would like to say about that.
Yeah, this is possibly going into the weeds a little bit, but yeah, when you put wood in streams, what tends to happen is you get a kind of a scouring effect on the downstream side of that dam or that structure, and you wind up you're mixing groundwater with surface water flow, and that mixing winds up cooling the surface water. So there have been studies that looked at the effects of wood in streams, and they found that downstream of large wood accumulations, you get colder water temperature.
As you said, Eric, we've been doing it artificially for 25 years, so we presumably know something about it. Yeah.
We have a lot of experience, and despite all of our experience, we still can't do it as well as beavers.
So Eric, I want to get to public comment, but I just have one quick question.
Yeah, but Jack, keep in mind that we engineer those, and the beavers,
Yeah.
they have a different driving engineering factor, huh?
I'm sure, yeah.
Eric, before they were extirpated, how common were they in Lagunitas watershed?
So for years, CDFW, or before then, Fish and Game, believed that beavers were not native south of about Mendocino County, but there's been some recent historical ecology work looking at actually explorer journals where explorers in the Bay Area just documented really widespread beavers, and of course, they were very excited about all the beavers because of the trapping potential. But by the time of the first official state wildlife surveys, the beavers were gone and they had been all trapped out. But Native American tribes throughout coastal California have words for beavers. The very earliest trapping records show that they were really widespread in coastal California.
Yeah.
So the closest documented beavers were in Bodega Bay, or in streams around Bodega Bay. We don't have any direct proof that they were in the Lagunitas Creek watershed, but they were north and south of us in great abundance.
Yeah. It's fascinating. So why don't we do public comment and see what our public has to say?
We have 5 public commenters, Gerald Merrill, then Gordon Bennett, please, in that order. Mr. Merrill.
Thank you, directors and staff, for this great presentation. And I want to say that for those of us out in West Marin who've been working on trying to find a home for the beavers for about 7 years, we want to thank Marcel Hutziger, the owner of Black Mountain Ranch, and the Gallaghers right across the creek for their support. I think it's vital to have rancher support for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon Bennett, please.
Hi. As Eric knows, I've been supportive of beaver reintroduction in my comments through the Lagunitas TAC for many years. But my concern is that if the introduction isn't handled properly, the blowback could torpedo the whole thing. And I'm quite concerned that there hasn't been enough public discussion about this. And I really think there should be one additional step in this process. And that additional step should be to have this issue go through the Lagunitas TAC, and the Lagunitas TAC make a recommendation to the board also. So let me outline some of the concerns I have, despite the fact that it would be great for salmon. First concern is that the beavers are not going to stay where they're introduced. They're going to move, they're going to expand. Point Reyes found this out when they relocated the elk into the wilderness area and said, oh, well, there'll be no problem. It's far away from the ranches. Well, now look what's happened. That same concern will be for the beavers. They're not going to stay where they're located initially. They're going to spread throughout Tomales Bay, and whatever concerns you have are not going to be limited just to Lagunitas Creek. They're going to be all over the place. So what are some of those concerns? Well, I'm less concerned about the ranchers. Ranchers will, I believe, benefit from this because the ponds that the beavers erect will erase some of their grazing lands. But the flip side of that is that the water table will increase the productivity on the remaining land. So I believe overall it'll be a benefit for ranchers. They should be happy with this. The only problem, of course, is when your pond and your last pasture is on your property and the increased productivity pastures are on your neighbor's property. So that's the problem. The biggest issue, of course, is homeowners. Homeowners, if you have an apple tree, beavers don't care. They'll eat it. You got a septic system, beavers don't care. The rising water table will make your septic field irrelevant. If you got a setback from a wetland, beavers don't care. You will have a greater wetland area. So these are problems that landowners are going to have. And I really think that the MMWD needs to look at this and figure out a way to prevent that from blowing back and exploding this project, because it's a very important project. And last thing I will say is Fish and Wildlife, yes, they can put beaver deceivers into the dams, but they have short on funding and short on staff. And it's going to be much easier for Fish and Wildlife to put a bullet in a beaver than a culvert into a beaver dam. And that's a blowback that I don't think we want to have. Thank you.
Thank you. The next two speakers, Nona Dennis, then Roger Roberts. Go ahead, Ms. Dennis.
Yeah, I'm curious as to why you're not also including Walker Creek from Arroyo Sosal downstream through the Walker Creek. Can you answer that, Eric?
Sure. In fact,
Well, that's where it first surfaced. Kind of the idea I first heard about wasn't Walker Creek.
Right. And so this has been a discussion for a number of years now, and Walker Creek was one of the first places that looked really promising. The Walker Creek Ranch, which is an environmental education facility, was really excited about the possibility of beavers and incorporating that into their environmental education and the wildlife benefits and sightings. And anyway, it looked very promising. Walker Creek has so many landowners, so many ranch owners that it would be very difficult to get everybody on board. And as Gordon pointed out, beavers do move around. And so in just meeting with some of the ranchers there through the Marin Resource Conservation District, it looked like that would be an uphill battle. And what really sort of changed things was the ranchers in Lower Lagunitas Creek expressing support for the project, which really now, it incorporates so much of Lower Lagunitas Creek that that seems like the best option at this point. But I could certainly see moving forward on Walker Creek as well. That's just a longer term process.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts, please.
Walker Creek may get settled by the beavers if, like it or not, if it is established in Lagunitas Creek. But I have a different concern, and I hope it's de minimis. Is there any risk of any of the salmon spawning areas being impacted by flooding as a result of beaver being in Lagunitas Creek, I realize that the lower reaches are likely to be the first area colonized, but if the beavers move upstream, you may have problems of destruction of bedding areas. So is there anything been done to study that risk?
Yeah, that's something that has come up. I mean, the concern for adult salmon, there are two. One is beaver dams blocking passage, and that's been a concern in a lot of streams, but it's been shown that adult salmon can navigate around beaver dams quite readily. And your concern about ponding, slowing the water, essentially turning fast flowing, good spawning habitat into slow water habitat, is good. And luckily, what we have in Lagunitas Creek, most of the salmon spawn in these redwood reaches through Samuel P. Taylor State Park that are really not appropriate beaver habitat. Beavers just cannot cut down redwood trees. So what we would expect is that the beavers would stay in the alder and willow dominated lower reaches of Lagunitas Creek, and the salmon would continue to spawn in the upper reaches and would get along quite happily.
Thank you.
Mr. Menikes, please.
Eric, thanks so much for that. It's very informative. I went online and it appears that the muskrats are really responsible for giardia through defecation. And it appears, at least from what a couple of scientists say, is that's how it gets into the beaver population. But what I'm wondering about is I noticed that there is a subspecies called the point-raised mountain beaver, so that we do have a native species here. I'm learning about this. I'm not making statements. I'm more or less asking. I'm curious if they are a traveling species, why they actually haven't moved into the creek itself or in other parts of Marin. And that's really my question. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the comment on the muskrats. That's true. I've read the same research, and as we discussed earlier, I really do think it's a communication issue, public education issue. I don't think that giardia is really a public health issue because we do have muskrats. So yes, I agree with that point. Your second point, point-raised mountain beaver, even though it's called a beaver, it's very distantly related. It's a very different kind of mammal, and is not aquatic, and I'm not sure how it got the name beaver at all. And your last point about beavers getting here on their own, it's true. There are beavers in the closest beavers are in the Napa River. They're also in the Russian River. And the real problem is that they don't travel through salt water any great distances, and Highway 101 is a real barrier to them. So they might show up in Marin County in 100 years or so, but this would be, in order to have the benefits that we want for the salmon, we would need to intervene.
Great. And can I follow up with that? So will you import these from the next county over? Where will these beavers come from?
That is the next step. So beavers are being lethally removed from agricultural land in the Central Valley and elsewhere in California. They're not currently being relocated because there isn't really, the state just doesn't have a mechanism for taking beavers that are causing problems in one place to move them someplace where they are wanted. So that's something that is going to have to be identified through this process.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
I have a quick question, Larry.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm sorry, I was unable to hear the answer to Gordon Bennett's question because my internet went goofy. Did we agree to loop in the other committee, or not. And if we didn't, I think Gordon's got a good idea.
Yeah, I think he had a good idea too.
The TAC meets tomorrow. So, we're a long way away from reintroducing the animals. And so my suggestion would be, I'm going to be attending TAC tomorrow. I don't know if Eric will be there.
I'll be there.
It'd probably be a good idea to add it, to make the TAC aware of it. I don't think that should delay the letter. I think it should just be part of the process of folding TAC into the process. I mean, this is really just an introduction to the concept. So I'd like to see the letter go out, but I think, TAC should be made aware of it, and it'll be done tomorrow morning. So.
That sounds right to me.
Are you saying that's on the agenda for?
No, it isn't. I'm just saying, I think we should get the letter out just to get this rolling, and then get tax comments folded in, because we're a long way away from actually implementing this. So I think we should, kind of get it moving, and then the process will kind of take its own course once we get it going.
Okay.
So I mean, my feeling is we should direct staff to get the letter out post haste.
Well, I think we need to take it to the full board for approval to send the letter. I think isn't that the?
It is a review and refer item, so that's
okay.
That's
all right.
correct. Yes.
Okay.
So I would recommend that.
Okay. I would second.
I think that's what it calls for, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, it does. Now that I look at the 14-point type, you're actually correct. So why don't we do that?
Okay.
Okay. All right, then if that's complete, let's move on to item 4, which is the amendment to ESA Lagunitas Creek Restoration Design Work Contract. And Sean.
Yeah, good afternoon, directors. We're going to have Jonathan Kohler give this presentation and an update on the amendment.
Good afternoon, directors. Jonathan Kohler, Fisheries Program Manager, here with Marin Water. So you probably heard the California Department of Fish and Wildlife awarded the district a grant for $869,178 to advance restoration design plans for Lagunitas Creek. And at the March 15th Board of Directors meeting just a couple days ago, the board passed a resolution authorizing the general manager to enter into a contract with CDFW to complete this work. So this grant is a continuation of the restoration planning work that the district has been leading for the past 2 years in collaboration with state parks, Lagunitas TAC, and a variety of other agencies. And at the start of this, the first phase of the project back in 2020, the district conducted a request for proposal process, and ESA, Environmental Science Associates, was selected as the most qualified consultant, and we awarded them the contract. So at this point, in order to advance the current 30% designs to the 100% stage, staff are requesting that the Watershed Committee refer this item to a regular bi-monthly meeting of the Board of Directors to authorize the general manager to amend ESA's existing contract. The amendment would extend the contract through July 2024 and increase the total contract amount to $1,169,178, which is basically the addition of this new grant money.
Okay, any questions or comments from the board?
Nope.
Okay, we did have this on the agenda a couple days ago. So is there any public comment?
There are none.
Is there a motion to refer the matter to the board for official approval?
So moved.
And do we have a second? Okay. And we don't need a roll call on that. So let's move on to item 5. Thanks, Jonathan. Item 5 is the consideration of the joint exercise of powers agreement for the processing of parking citations.
We're going to bring Don Wick in to give this presentation.
Good afternoon, board members and others. I'm Don Wick, Chief Ranger for the Water District. This is an agreement that we're already part of. We entered into it in 1982. It's the Marin Parking Authority Agreement. The document's been looked at several times over the years. Last year, group decided it needed to be updated. The Sheriff's Office, who is the lead agency in this group, took it to County Council. And the biggest change that we made, there's some minor changes, but the biggest change we made is going from a joint powers agreement to a joint exercise powers agreement, which doesn't subject us to the Brown Act, which we don't have regular meetings anyway, so it makes it a little bit easier for us. Having the agreement in place allows us to have one voice for the group in dealing with the vendors or the vendor that processes and does all the things with the citations, processes them, and collects the fees and fines. So it's again, it's an agreement that we've already been entered into since 1982, and it's just some cleanup language. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to take them.
Is there a fee schedule, or how do they get paid?
So there is a fee schedule, and each agency pays, but that is collected through the fines that the parking sites generate. So it doesn't actually come from us, it comes from the citations.
And then they will also notify them of their right to hearing if they want to dispute a citation.
They handle all that.
Okay.
That is correct. And they notify DMV if somebody's outstanding, hasn't paid the citation, they'll notify DMV, and then a lien will be put on them for when they register their car. They'll get paid that way.
Okay, sounds pretty routine. Any other questions, comments from the board?
No.
Any public comment?
Yes, Roger Roberts, please. Mr. Roberts.
Just a matter of curiosity, what percentage of the parking fees that are paid come back to MMWD to help cover your costs?
Mr. Roberts, I don't know the exact percentage of it. The majority comes back to us, but I don't know the exact percentage. They do take their fees off of it and off of the fines also. I can look that up if you want to.
Well, it may be significant or it may be insignificant. I'm just curious if
I think it's very low percentage. I did look at it a while ago, and I know the percentage is actually really low for what they collect.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. There aren't any more comments.
Okay, good to know. I just got a parking ticket when I worked on that bridge project that was on the agenda.
Sometimes we're ruthless.
Yeah, that's okay. My wife paid it, so I got off. So
we're recommending it goes before the board for a signature.
Okay, do we have a motion and a second to do that?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, very
and you know, Larry, it just goes to show you that no good deed goes unrewarded.
And I was mumbling that under my breath. Okay, let's go to item 6, which is the Watershed Recreation Management Plan update.
Good afternoon, Director Sean Horn, Watershed Resource Manager. This is an informational item. We're going to give you an update on the recreation planning process, and I've got a presentation I'm going to share with you, so I'll pull that up real quick. All right, so this is an update on where we are with the recreation planning process. The district, I'm going to go through just an overview of the watershed and area that we're looking at as part of this recreation planning effort, go through the initial scoping process that we've gone through to date, talk about the request for proposals that we put out, and the recreation planning scope of work, and then the preliminary schedule for that. So as you all know, the focus of this is on the 21,000 acres of watershed land that the Water District manages and operates, the 7 municipal reservoirs, As we found out in our 2013 census study, we have approximately 1.8 million visitors that come to these watershed lands through about 37 park entrances. So it's a very porous watershed. We have about 92 miles of fire roads or service roads that we maintain on the watershed for public access and for maintaining infrastructure. We have 59 miles of hiking trail that are open throughout the watershed. And then we have 60 miles of social trail that have been established through folks wandering where they would like to go on the watershed. We have 5 picnic grounds that people utilize. And then we have a suite of natural resources in the form of 400 wildlife species and 1,000 species of plants that make this a very rich and biologically diverse area of Marin County. We have a number of watershed management plans in place to date that help us with our operations on the watershed. We have our Mount Tam Roads and Trails Management Plan that was put in place in 2005. We have our Lagunitas Creek Stewardship Plan that was put in place in 2011. We conducted our watershed census survey in 2013. We've input our biological monitoring data into the peak health report that the One Tam Collaborative works on. That was published in 2016. And then we have our Biodiversity, Fires, and Fuels Integrated Plan, which was adopted in 2019. These are all great efforts that help guide our operations, but none of them deal specifically with recreation management. In addition to those, we conduct a number of biological monitoring and inventories on the watershed on an annual basis. Some of those include yellow-legged frog monitoring, osprey monitoring at Kent Lake, triannual bird monitoring, rare plant inventories that's going to lead to a long-term monitoring plan. We have serpentine endemic occupancy project that we conduct with One Tam, as well as an early detection rapid response for invasive species. We conduct a northern spotted owl monitoring activities each year to inform our operations. We've conducted lichen inventories on the watershed, and then our fisheries program manages adult salmon monitoring, smolt monitoring, and juvenile salmon monitoring. In addition, under our BIFIP, we're conducting forest pest and pathogen inventories to help us understand those on the watershed, looking at doing seeps and springs monitoring and grassland inventories, all under the One Tam or under the BIFIP. And then all of these monitoring activities, like I mentioned, feed up into the One Tam Peak Health Update, which is a much broader effort with our collaborating partners. Now, for the recreation management planning process, this is really a focused look at recreation. It's not meant to replace any of our existing management documents or duplicate those efforts. So it's really a proactive and adaptive process that we're setting in place, helping us to achieve and maintain some desired natural resource conditions and improve the visitor experience. So that's kind of the focus of this particular planning process. We're using this visitor use management framework to kind of guide the overall effort. Really what we're going to be doing a deep dive on with our stakeholders is building the foundation, or the why. This is some of what we tackled in the initial scoping phase, which I'll speak to, but we'll be going into more detail, trying to define the purpose and the need and the issues that we're going to be trying to grapple with through this planning process, and identifying those areas of information that we have and more data that we need to guide that effort. From there, we'll be looking at what our desired conditions are and working with stakeholders to define those, and then identifying the management strategies, or the how, to achieve those future desired conditions. And then from there, developing an adaptive management process to allow us to implement and monitor and adapt as we go. So we started this out with an initial public scoping phase. We partnered with the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy to facilitate 2 public scoping meetings. As part of that process, we outreached to 57 community groups. We had 227 individuals participate in these 2 public meetings. The first meeting on May 21st, we had guest presenters who provided foundational concepts around recreation management. And then the June 25th meeting, we did breakout sessions, really starting to get community input into what the recreation planning process would look like, what some of those desired conditions were. From that, we developed a summary memo that we fed into our request for proposals. What we found in that summary memo was that stakeholders really wanted to see a data-driven decision-making process. They wanted to ensure that there was ongoing public engagement throughout the planning effort. Inclusivity was a theme that took kind of 2 avenues, including equitable access and diverse visitor groups, wanting those to be both evaluated through this planning process, and then interest in balancing conservation with recreation, and then also an interest in visitor management to spread out and separate different types of use. And then stewardship as the foundation of a plan to protect biodiversity and water quality was the theme. So the initial scoping really fed into the request for proposals that we developed and put out to consultants. At the end of the day, we selected Alta Planning and Design. We brought an item to the board at the March 1st meeting to initiate their contract. The scope of work for that contract really includes this overarching project management. And then the first large task is a literature review, really diving into different recreation management plans that are out there and best management practices that have been developed. And that information will help feed into our watershed recreation management plan and the community engagement planning process. So the community engagement planning process will be the first major effort that we take on in the next couple of months to really outline a process in which we bring stakeholders in to help inform the whole effort. From there, we'll go into a visitor census survey update and collecting additional use patterns through different means to help us understand how people are using the watershed and how we can improve operations. And then really focusing with stakeholders on stewardship and outreach strategies that can be used to inform recreational and influence recreational culture on the mountain. And then looking at those visitor management strategies. Are there changes that we can make to our facilities to how people are using the lands to help address some of the issues that we're seeing? And those will be our management actions that we carry out over the future years. So to give our stakeholders an understanding of the community engagement process, we're very early on that, and in this effort to bring on the consultant, we'll be working to get them under contract and moving. And the first effort will really be to engage our community members in the process. The intention is to have 10 stakeholder meetings. This consultant will also interview a number of water agencies regarding recreation management, as well as our partners at within the one-TAM agencies. Within those stakeholder meetings, there will be a series of workshops. So there'll be 2 series, one at the beginning and one at the end. Those will be workshops for the public to come and really help inform how this process is going to unfold and how we look at issues and how we engage with them, and really defines kind of the different field trips that we develop to get people out on the watershed to kind of come to a common understanding of what we're seeing and the issues that are out there, and come up with different techniques and tools that we can develop as part of this process to help us influence those issues. From there, we'll have opportunities for volunteers to participate in our visitor use surveys through direct counts and through questionnaires to visitors. So we actually bring information from the field back into this planning process to help inform where it goes. And then also we'll be bringing a large amount of data from different sources together. That'll include trail counters that we're putting out on the watershed and publicly available cell phone data that we can grab. And through a data analysis process, we'll really be able to look at the patterns of use on the watershed. And that'll be, we'll go into a deep dive with our stakeholders to really understand where the issues are happening and how we might be able to influence them through different strategies. So next steps in this entire process, as I mentioned, we went to the board March 1st to get the contract approved. We're working on getting that in place now. The first task for the consultant will be the literature review and developing the community engagement plan. Our intention now is to have our first community engagement kind of kickoff meeting in May. So that's what we're targeting right now. May of 2022 would be when we bring stakeholders in and we really outline a schedule for this entire process and the ways that they'll be able to engage. And we'll be allowing for input to kind of drive that entire process. So it'll be very iterative in that way. And then we'll move forward with our data collection in the fall, which aligns with when we did our 2013 census survey. So we can compare a little bit. We'll also be taking the input from the community to help inform the different types of questions that we ask when we're doing those surveys out on the watershed. And then we'll kind of slowly through the subsequent meetings, move through these other categories such as stewardship and outreach, really helping to refine the programs that we have and develop new ones. And then looking at our facilities through field trips and asking questions about how we can improve visitor facilities on the watershed. At the end of this, we'll get a set of management actions and visitor management strategies that we can put into place and actually operate under. So that's just a general update on where we are with the watershed recreation plan. And I think the takeaway here is that stakeholders can anticipate a meeting in May where we'll be reaching out to them in different ways, social media, as well as email lists to bring people into that first initial meeting. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and take any questions that you might have.
Okay, thanks, John.
Yeah.
I have a question, Larry.
Go ahead.
I think we should put real emphasis, John, on bathrooms. And I think we need to seriously address the cleaning issues, that these things get cleaned routinely and that we have sufficient numbers to meet the demand. I think we've been kind of negligent in that area for a long time, or at least deficient. And I think we need to get that straightened out. So I'd like to see some real effort put into the bathrooms.
Yeah, we'll note that. I think that's a great one that we saw during the COVID. We saw the major siege. I think before COVID, we were spending about $30,000 on restroom facilities on an annual basis. With the increase of the number that we put out there and the increased servicing, we're spending about $120,000 a year on restrooms now. And I can say that I think they're in much better shape than pre-COVID, and we've maintained that level of servicing. But I think there are continue to be ways that we can continue to improve in that area.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
I was just going to say how impressed I was by the array of studies that you listed at the beginning. It's really like a master's program. I mean, it's like master's thesis times 12. I did go up Happersburger, and I don't want to get too far off track as far as the overarching theme that you presented. But I did want to mention that there's still concern about the erosion from Happersburger. There's parts of it that have really eroded almost to where it's a vertical climb. Staff did sign the entryway, which is good. It's although I don't know if it's an invitation to bikers, but I was just going to say Happersburger connects to Y2K, which it seems like it might be worth taking a look at whether we could close Y2K, because that's an illegal trail. I haven't walked it, so I don't really know what the conditions are there. And I guess just to fit into the presentation, I assume the recreation plan is going to be looking at retiring various trails and sort of selectively decommissioning other trails, which actually Nona brought up with the Azalea project. So is that included in the scope of the work?
Yeah, thank you. So absolutely part of the process is looking at all of our facilities, be that trails, roads, picnic areas, restrooms, and just ask those questions. Where can we improve things, and where can things be closed, opened? Can routes be improved? Can we kind of change the type of use on different avenues, or create new strategies such as one-way trails and things of that sort? So yeah, all of those discussion points will be as part of this kind of collective analysis.
Yeah. And then I don't know if the chief ranger is still on the call or not, but whether there's any, whether there'll be any consideration or discussion of setting up trail cameras for, if not enforcement, at least survey of usage.
So we do use different technology to help us inform our operations in regards to ranger enforcement. So we do use some trail cameras to help inform when and where we are sending out rangers to patrol.
Well said. Yeah. I like that. Okay. Any other questions from the board or staff? Okay, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of, I expect there'll be some public comment. So why don't we move on to public comment?
Yes, we have 3 so far: Roger Roberts, Nona Dennis, and then Renee Voss. Mr. Roberts, please.
Where does signage fit into this whole process of controlling and encouraging use in certain areas and not in other areas? And how is that going to be cranked into this process so that when we finish this in the mid 20s, I may not be around in those days, but signage is important in terms of management efforts, and I think you need to stress and find out from the public where you have to educate them and then get their input as to where signage would help them. So I hope signage will be, very much part of the process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just note signage is part of the scope of work, and that will be further discussed as well and thought about.
Ms. Dennis, please.
Yeah, hi, thanks. So we will have more comments as this process moves forward. But I think Larry, you brought up an interesting point, just, mentioning Happersburger. That's really been the a prime concern, of course, people who use Cascade Canyon, open space preserve, which is county. My point is that you saw this morning, I'm sorry, this afternoon, you saw the first presentation, which was on Azalea Hill, and it's a bright, shiny, wonderful looking trail. We've been told, and it's been many years in the making, the urging, the advocating for, the planning, and it's coming through in a very positive way. But we've been reminded over and over again, particularly in regard to Happersburger and other trails on the watershed, that there is a huge volume of deferred maintenance. And so rather than, I know there's a very eager constituency out there that's looking to see a kind of transformation of the watershed into something else, more access. But be realistic, and I think the planning should be realistic when it considers what we've heard over and over again, which is limited resources to, certainly to build trails, even limited resources to try to decommission them or improve them. And so I hope that some of the hyperbole that's circulating in some quarters on more access is realistic, that the plan is realistic about what the watershed, the water district really can do in order to accommodate more recreation on the watershed. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Voss, please.
Yeah, this is Renee Voss. Thank you for the excellent presentation, Sean. One thing I heard you say was that the recreation plan is not meant to replace the existing watershed plans. In particular, the question I have is about the roads and trails management plan, which a long time ago made decisions on which trails would be official trails and not. So I assume what I'm hearing you say is that those decisions won't be revisited here, that the overall plan is more of a different approach. I just want to get a clarification about whether or not that's correct. My assumption is correct, that the roads and trails management decisions aren't going to be revisited.
So the Roads and Trails Management Plan provides best management practices for maintaining roads and trail systems. It does identify the system trails, and then similarly, Azalea Hill was done as an amendment to that document, so it provided a foundational compliance document that gave us the ability to amend it to add a new trail. So the focus of this recreation planning process is really to evaluate visitor usage and look at how we can protect natural resources through updating and making modifications to operations. And if there are trail improvements that come out of those discussions and those thoughts, then they'd be evaluated as a potential amendment to that roads and trails document potentially.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Voss. Chris Hobbs, please. Chris.
Hi, thank you. The plan, thank you for describing the plan. You mentioned interviews with other management agencies. I'm just, I think that going outside the Bay Area would be illuminating, just because from what I've heard and seen the last few years, trail conflict in Marin in particular is pretty intense. There are areas, Southern California, Phoenix, Central Oregon, where they have a lot of trail use and they just don't have the same same amount of trail conflict. They figured out how to make it work for all of their users in a way that seems to be, at least creates fewer complaints. So I would recommend that you go far and wide in terms of looking for inspiration and possible strategies to accommodate all of the users on the watershed. And obviously it's become, very intensively used by a lot of people in different ways. And I think that's a positive for us overall, in terms of, the health, mental and physical health. But we do need to figure out how to share it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tom Boss, please.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to, first of all, acknowledge staff. I think you did a really good job of putting this together. You listened to lots of different stakeholders with lots of different interests and put forward what I think is hopefully going to produce a good outcome for both the watershed, the health of the watershed, and also for the safety and enjoyment of all the people who visit and cherish those visits on the watershed. I did, since the Happers Burgers come up, I've hiked that trail recently because of, it's been brought to my attention what's going on. I've met with some of the people on this call and about that particular trail. It's a complicated situation. It's not something that can be easily fixed. And I think the management, this outcome of this recreation plan is likely the best avenue to address things like that. What's performing well, what's not, how can we fix those things or manage them? And that particular trail, a lot of it's actually performing fine. It's the very steep sections, and to be clear, this is not a bike trail. I'm not advocating for bikes on that trail, but it's been there for decades. And it has some issues, but where the issues are happening, you can address those issues. You can fix them. You can improve your management. Again, these are all things that can be discussed and vetted through a management plan. So I look forward to moving this forward quickly so we can get to some of these issues. I would also like to point out that there's lots of trails all over the watershed that are also in poor condition, showing erosion. And yeah, so more reason to focus on how to manage these things, how to care for our trails, and hopefully work together on a solution-based process. I also just wanted to say there's been talk about increased access. That's not how I see it. I see it not, or more people visiting. No, what I think is what we're going to see is the people who are visiting are going to be distributed more evenly, given places to go, know where not to go. We're not advocating for more access. We're just asking for a balanced access and also, of course, protecting the resource. So thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Larry Minikes, please.
Yeah, I'm really segueing to Tom's comments, about health of the watershed as being critical, and want to reiterate that when we talk about sharing, we're sharing with wildlife, and that wildlife has to be first and foremost in any recreation plan, that we are protecting the resource. And it's late. That's all I really wanted to add to the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Minikes. There are no further comments.
Okay. We've reached the end of our agenda. I don't want to prolong it. I do think this recreation plan, Sean, is really the crucible for the district as far as bringing a lot of different stakeholders into a fairly complex web of issues. So I really encourage your fortitude and discipline to get through it. It's very important, as you know. So thank you for the presentation. One other thing was the reaching out to the Spanish-speaking community. Very important, and I'm glad to see you included it. So if there's no more comments or questions from the board, then I think we can adjourn this meeting, and thank you all. It's always a great meeting.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you all.
Yeah.